I just came across an article that's kind of made me vex. The reason why it's made me vex is because we as a people, black people, we suffer enough like from people outside of our race. If you want to say use the word race, I don't like to use the word race because I know we human beings we all one race. There are no differences, but because for the sake of this discussion, I'm going to say race. There's people outside of our or ethnic group or outside of our African blackness or whatever you want to say that treat us a certain way. I know not every single black person is treated a certain way, but at the end of the day, at the majority of us, um, in terms of economics and different things, we fall for percentage wise. We fall at the bottom of the ladder. Things that happens in all over the world for black people is negative, and usually those people, um, blacks who have come from descendants of Africans who were forced out of Africa, who were sold by other Africans. Um, I use that word African quite loosely because African is not really a term that we would even use in those days. We wasn't really, well, it was something that was pushed on us or put on us or labeled that was put on us. Obviously, we didn't see ourselves as one people. We was different peoples fighting each other and having wars, and just like the Europeans was doing. So we were selling our enemies most of the time. But going back to that, forget about that. That's a long time ago. But the thing is, it's a long time ago, but it's not really a long time ago. You know what I'm saying? Because I just was reading this article and I've come across it slightly before, but it's really made me want to just make this short. Just speak to my African brothers and my Caribbean brothers, my African American brothers, that certain things that we do it just reinforces the negativity that we're already facing. And one of these things is what I'm going to come to. Story I'm going to come to say is that I was reading an article about a couple from the Igbo region of Nigeria. They committed suicide. They were about to be married and they committed suicide. You know why they committed suicide? Because I'm trying to think now. The young man, this is the young man. His ancestry, he's got slave ancestry. You hear what I'm saying? Now, a lot of you wouldn't even think about that. That there's Africans, and I know about this, but I haven't really gone into it deeply. There is Africans in Africa, and I'm talking about the Igbo region here. I don't know about Yoruba, Hausa, all the other regions like in Ghana, in Sierra Leone, all those regions there, East Africa. I don't know, but this is a story that's come up, and I'm quite angry about how these people have been treated. Now, you might say to yourself, what, slave descendants in Africa? Yes, of course. Because before the Europeans came to Africa, the slavery was in Africa, all over Africa. Now, some people would say, well, slavery was there, but it was a different form of slavery. So people kind of excuse it, made it feel like, because they always want to make the white man look bad. We know the white man is bad. We know some of them, has done bad things. We know that. Some of the things are unspeakable. And slavery, yes, in Africa was different, but we can't just blanket statement as it was different all over. Over every single person in slavery, just like in the West, get treated according to the master they have, treated according to the area, the time, the decade. All that makes a difference to how you was treated. Slavery in Africa was always there, and in the Igbo region, there were slaves. There were slaves right up until the year. You know when slavery ended? It ended when the British took over that region. It wasn't Nigeria at the time. It was because the British took over. What we call Nigeria now is made up of many parts, and Britain made agreements with each little part. Some of them was peaceful agreements. Some of them was actually war. So with the Benin region, they went to war. They destroyed Benin. But with other regions, they made agreements with the chiefs. They made agreements where the chiefs would be protected from his enemies. The English would come in, help them out, all different ways. That's how things was happening. People, a lot of this thing wasn't like people making agreements. It's not a race thing. It's just people make agreements for their own benefit. So some African kings will make a deal with the English because that would help them to protect them from their stronger enemies. And that's how England took the region bit by bit through agreements, and some of it was through war. Anyway, slavery was there. So when the British actually finally took over most of what we call Nigeria now, it wasn't called Nigeria at the time. It wasn't no such thing as Nigeria. People need to understand. Nigeria was named Nigeria in about 1913. So Nigeria is a fresh, new country. The name of it and everything is fresh and new. So there's no actual nation called Nigeria during slavery. It was just all of the different tribes was doing their thing. The Igbos had their slaves. And I know this for a fact because I've come across it in many different sources. Now, my African brothers from the Igbo region, I haven't really sat down and spoke to an Igbo person, but I know some of my African friends might not even know the full story of slavery within their region. But I know when people grow up in Africa, they get told stories. So I know there's a certain amount of level of understanding about slavery, but people don't have the full understanding about it. But there's been articles going out, some fresh articles. One article was written by this Nigerian girl in the New York Times, and her granddad or great granddad was actually a slave trader. That's how close she was to it. And she had a brilliant article. That article is excellent because it gives you a detailed account of how slavery went on in that region. And I've been studying it for years, slavery, for years upon years upon years, because I want to understand the fullness of it. Anyway, slavery was in the Igbo region before the white man came there. And during that period when white man was buying slaves, it was slaves that was buying. Some of them was already slaves. They were already slaves that was buying slaves. But then some slaves were prisoners of war. Some were victims of slave raiding. There's so many ways you could become a slave. Some was debt slaves. Some people become slave because they want to be slave because it's the only way they can live. So they choose to become a slave. This is within Africa I'm talking about here, within Nigeria. It wasn't called Nigeria then, I keep telling you that. Anyway, this article is fresh. September article. I don't know when the couple committed suicide. But they committed suicide because their parents, or one of the parents, wouldn't allow them to marry. Why? Because the young man is actually a descendant of a slave. Because there were slaves in that region. And when the British banned slavery in Nigeria, in that region, what happened is that a lot of the slaves became part of the family and took on the same names, but people still know who's who. So you might be a descendant, you might have the name of your master, but people know that you're a descendant. They will know, they track you down, they know that you're a slave or you're a descendant of a slave. Now, we're worrying about blacks in America being killed by police and all that kind of stuff, and yet we have Africans in that region, and maybe other regions too. I'm gonna check it out. Won't allow somebody from their own region marry somebody who's so-called a free person. So you have the free person, the free man and free woman, and you have this enslaved. They're not slaves, now, but they still got the label, the tag, the stigma is still there. That is absolute foolishness. I want our people. I mean, I say our people. Obviously, I'm not Igbo. I'm not Nigerian. I'm not African. And my ancestors are Africans. I could call myself African if I want to. I don't mind if somebody call me African, because that's my DNA comes from there. But obviously, my culture has been watered down through being in the Caribbean and descendants of slaves and what kind of stuff. But I want people to understand in those regions that we need to start change our ways. Has to come out of these old traditions, because I know there's a priest, a Catholic priest, and another woman who's going around in those regions trying to educate people about this foolishness and saying no. They sit down. These things that we're doing, that a slave person, that descendant of a slave, can't marry a free person, descendant of a free person. That has to stop. Let's re-educate ourselves, because what that woman is trying to do in Nigeria, that she's trying to re-educate people to say that the laws was made by men. The laws was made by men, so that means the law can be unchanged. It can be changed by man. You know what I'm saying? Don't stick to something that's so old because it's old. You have two types of slaves. I won't say the names, I can't remember. One belongs to gods, the gods. So you've got slaves that belong to gods, temple slaves. And if you're descendant of a temple slave, you're worse off than one descended from a human slave. So you could be a human slave descended from your slave master was a human. But if your slave master was a god, then you're in a worse position according to this article, and I'm going to check it out even further. So these people who are descendants of slaves, they're discriminated. They can't get leadership. They can't do this. Can't they can make money, but still, when it comes to being married and different things, they get discriminated against. That doesn't even happen in America. A black man could marry a slave, a descendant of a slave in America could marry anybody he wants. It used to be you couldn't marry. There used to be problems with that years ago, but in this time you can marry anybody. A black man in England from Africa, he can marry anybody he wants. I don't know whether if the Igbos in this region, England, is going to stipulate those laws, and I don't think it's every Igbo doing it. I'm not blaming everyone. I'm not blaming anyone about this. I'm just trying to educate people, and for you to check this out, what I'm talking about. If you just Googled Nigerians not allowed to marry or something like that, or you just Google something, you get so much articles come up on this thing because there's articles that come up just talking about the thing in general, and there's articles dealing with this particular case where the couple actually committed suicide. Could you imagine that? They committed suicide because they couldn't get married. That's how much trauma and distress that was caused because they were in love. And you have old people, sit down there with their old stupid traditions. Not every tradition is good, you know. Some black people, yeah, we live for tradition. We think that tradition's everything. It's not only us. There's Asian people that live for tradition, but tradition's only good when it's good. If a tradition is like that, it's not. If a tradition's hurting people, it's not a good tradition. You've got people circumcising females. That's not a good tradition. Burn that tradition, burn that tradition out. That's not a good tradition. Not every religion or not every belief or cultural practice is good. Some people say the Western, like they impose certain things in Africa, but certain things that they imposed in Africa was good. Tell you the truth, some of it was good. Not all of it is good, but some of the things that we was doing is not good. So, the UK had to ban slavery in Nigeria. Not only that, UK banned slavery in Ghana because that's when they took it over. So when they colonized it, okay, we can talk all day about what the negativity of the colonized. We can talk all day. That's another topic altogether. But let's talk about the things that came out of that. Slavery was abolished. Now, for those who think slavery in Africa was okay, peaceful, you can believe that. But ask yourself, nobody wants to be a slave because slave is looked down upon in Africa. People in the Western world, slavery was dehumanized. We went to the next level of looking down on. It was worse than being in Africa. But at the same time, in Africa, if you're a slave, that stigma lives with you till today. That shows you how bad it is. So it can't be a good thing, can it? It can't be a good thing. Even Olaudah Equiano, the African Igbo that wrote a book in England here in 1790. Even his parents, even his family had slaves. He says it in his book. He was Igbo, he had slaves. Yeah, but he did stipulate that slaves wasn't treated like, only thing they couldn't do is eat with the actual free people. So there was a form of class distinction with the slaves, but there wasn't nowhere degraded like in the West. And not every slave was degraded in the West. Some was like, the majority was, but some was just, some people, slaves was treated a certain way, depending on the master. But Olaudah Equiano, who wrote a book here in England, he had slaves also. His family had slaves, and he was caught as a slave by other blacks, probably other Igbos from that region, and took him right across the country. It's 6 months, and within 6 months he was sold at least 3 times to other Africans of the Igbo region and other regions before he was even sold to the Englishman, and before he ended up in Barbados and then Virginia, and then he ended up in England. But that's another story. But all I'm saying is that slavery is not good then, and it's not good now. So anybody that has treating people because they're descendants of slaves and not allowing them to marry who they want to, that is absolute madness, foolishness, and ignorance. We don't need to be ignorant anymore. Thank you.